And with choosing native species for pastures and stormwater management. Cutter is an active Urban Land Institute member and Rotarian who enjoys any opportunity to serve his community as well as Mother Nature. Hunter's fascination with nature and our species placed in it, led him to earn a BA in Cultural and Evolutionary Anthropology from the University of Colorado and a certificate in Urban Agriculture from Purdue. He currently works to promote sustainable development practices as the Green Space Property Manager at Gale Communities. He is a fierce opponent of bush honeysuckle. Hunter also enjoys working as the production lead for Zen Donkey Farms. You heard that right, Zen Donkey Farms, a Greenwood-based donkey rescue that produces organic cold-pressed juice and offers donkey-assisted therapy. With that, I will turn it over to Cutter and Hunter.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cutter Gale.
And I'm Hunter Gale.
And we are brothers working alongside each other in our family's community development business. First off, we want to sincerely thank all the hardworking folks at Deep Roots for not only assembling yet another first-class Planet Native conference, but also for allowing us to share our perspective on the topic of sustainable development. And thank you, viewers that have tuned into our session today. We're hopefully you're able to learn a thing or two from our presentation, or better yet, maybe you're able to give us some pointers on what we could be doing to ensure we set a good example for others in our field. We'd like to preface our talk today with the fact that we don't claim to be experts when it comes to native plants or even all things green, because the reality is that we're really making this up as we go. I'm confident that at some point in our lecture today, some of you will be scratching your heads wondering why the heck did they think that was a good idea. But in the development business, you really need to have a good understanding of a wide array of concepts and professions, everything from engineering to landscaping, city requirements and processes, housing trends, heavy construction. It's a long list. So despite our best efforts to educate ourselves through hours of research, viewing informative seminars like Planet Native, and meeting with bright minds who specialize in native planning, the reality is that we've gained a lot of our knowledge through trial and error. And as with anything else, the knowledge comes with time. Our goal isn't to be the smartest ones in the room, but rather to always be refining our process and to never stop learning.
And because our parents are always mixing the two of us up, I'll go ahead and remind you all that I'm Hunter and that is Cutter. In today's presentation, we will be covering four main topics, starting with some context on our current Lee's Summit-based residential development known as the 6 neighborhoods of Winterset, and discuss the major ways Winterset has stood out from the rest in regards to conservation and green techniques. We'll also discuss our struggles with invasive insect and plant species that we've encountered during Winterset's 33 years of development. Later, we'll compare our approach to similar community developments we've visited throughout the country, and conclude with a brief overview of our next mixed-use development project in Liberty, Missouri, and how we will incorporate the lessons we have learned to maximize its resiliency.
So for some context on the family business, our father, David Gale, created his company, Gale Communities, and purchased a couple hundred acres here in Lee's Summit back in 1989 and successfully created small residential community that he named Winterset. He named it Winterset because there's an abundance of Winterset limestone bedrock that's scattered across the site, which has made development of this area really tricky because this layer of rock creates a big challenge when installing sanitary sewers and other utilities. It's typical when developing new phases that a large rock pounder be brought in to hammer away at the limestone, sometimes for weeks on end, just to get the sanitary and storm pipe in at the correct elevations. We're lucky though, because we can recycle a lot of this excavated rock and turn it into limestone fines for our trails, making retaining walls or create riprap rock aprons to slow water flow for various creek outlets and detention pond culverts.
Since the initial 200 acres was developed, it has since expanded into 1,200 acres and is now collectively known as the 6 neighborhoods of Winterset. Additionally, Gale Communities broadened its horizons with the creation of its sister company, Gale Homes, whose bread and butter is residential custom home builds within Winterset. What you're looking at is a current map of the entire 1,200-acre development, a map that we update annually and provide to residents. Winterset is comprised of 6 individual sub-neighborhoods we've named Winterset Summit, which was the initial project, Winterset Park, Winterset Woods, Winterset Gardens, Winterset Valley, and our current portion still under development called Winterset Falls. There's a variety of housing types between the 6 neighborhoods, ranging from 1.5-acre estate lots to maintenance-provided active adult type residences, so residents have a range of lifestyle options to choose from.
Winterset Falls is the last neighborhood of Winterset before it's a wrap on the entire development due to the simple fact that we're just out of developable acreage. It will mark the end of what will be a 35-year journey once completed. It's a journey that we're proud to say has earned numerous environmental preservation awards, more so than any other developer in the 4-state region. These awards include the first global relief designation from American Forest, which is the oldest national nonprofit conservation organization that's located here in the U.S. And additionally, we've received recognition from the Arbor Day Foundation, the Edison Institute, and the National Association of Home Builders, among several others.
In the early 90s, when Winterset was just getting started, it pioneered and introduced to Lee's Summit several eco-friendly engineering and architectural standards. It enforced the use of dual-source heat pumps in all new home builds and required that all homes use asphalt shingles instead of cedar shakes, due to the inherent fire hazard that comes with using cedar shakes. In regard to our development approach, roadways were specially designed to work with the existing contours of the land, ensuring less disturbance in the grading process or earthwork. This also means signature trees and landscapes could be saved.
Additionally, we mill all of our dead trees to create mulch berms as means for type of erosion control and new phases that are under development. And this is the preferred method over using silt fence, because more often than not, silt fence gets shredded to pieces during the development process, and it always ends up in the surrounding creeks and streams. So we always push to use mulch berms as much as possible. And one key differentiating aspect of Winterset is this 10 plus miles of walking trails. But before we get into the details on our trail systems and the remaining green aspects of Winterset, we'd like to first kind of set the scene with a short video that will give you a sense of the scenery that our trails have to offer. Happy to say that Winterset has quite a wide range of waterfalls, and a lot of our trails we do our best to create running alongside these waterfalls so that people have nice natural landscapes to be looking at while they're on their walks outside. Plenty of elevation changes throughout the neighborhood, so it's quite some good exercise that you can get walking in the 100 plus acres that we have behind our neighborhoods. Great. So that gives you an idea of the setting. And we really consider our trails as one of our most prized possessions. They give people the opportunity to get out into nature and view a lot of these different varying landscapes that are really just steps from their own door. And every new phase in the neighborhood comes the opportunity to create new sections of trails. And with the completion of our newest portion, named Winterset Falls, trail goers will have the opportunity to walk past the largest waterfall in the neighborhood, which sits at about 8 feet tall. We've created a majority of these trails over the sanitary sewer line installations because many times these sewer lines will need to be cut through and installed within forested areas. And rather than just leave large scars and cuts throughout the forest, we use it as a chance to lay limestone fines and form these trails. While walking through these forested areas on the trails, you have the opportunity to come across so many different types of wildlife. And we had actually purchased a trail cam and set it up, and just after 1 week of it being up, we're happily impressed with what we had found. We have several chief executives of our rabbit and squirrel control. We got a little fox and the coyote, and we were delighted when we saw this bobcat out for his nightly stroll. So retaining this diverse wildlife within our forests is really part of what we strive to make Winterset all about.
Another green aspect of Winterset is our use of regional infiltration basins, or detention ponds, that allow for the filtering of stormwater runoff for larger sections of the neighborhood, which helps to purify the water via native vegetation before it runs off into the surrounding creeks and streams. This is a picture of one of our retention ponds that stems from a nearby detention basin. Just so you know, detention ponds will drain while retention ponds will hold their water. We utilize these ponds to serve as amenities to the community and build trails around them with benches for residents to enjoy the view.
One aspect that helps to set us apart from the other communities is our abundance of trees. And to help plant responsibly, Winterset has imposed a street tree program that we put on all new build jobs in new developments. And this program requires homeowners and builders to select from a pre-approved list of trees that are native to Missouri. And depending on which lot they're building on, we will typically complete a plat map of the new phase and designate each lot with either an A, B, or C designation. And each category has several street trees the homeowner can choose from, as you can see on this list that's up on your page. And breaking up these options with different lot designations really ensures that we don't have a grouping of similar street trees all in a row along the street. It adds some variety to the scene.
In 2018, we were introduced to the Deep Roots organization and quickly recognized that native plants belonged in Winterset for many reasons, most of which you all already know, like promoting the health of the local ecosystem, soil stabilization, solving watershed issues, savings on water costs, and providing a beautiful, more natural feel for residents in the neighborhood. To date, we have experimented with these 4 types of landscapes, beginning with a 7,500-foot bioswale.
So the area highlighted in yellow represents the boundaries of this swale. And as you can imagine, we bit off slightly more than we could chew with this being our first native plant project. We really jumped off the deep end on this landscape, but in turn walked away with a real wealth of knowledge as to what it really takes to create a successful native landscape, what questions to ask, and how to properly maintain it, and other key aspects. But right off the bat, my first piece of advice to other developers would be to start with something more of a smaller planting area so that you can get a general idea of the maintenance and potential issues that come with these types of installations.
This particular area serves as a stormwater trough that leads to the nearby detention basin and is located off a main road right by the entrance to our Winterset Valley neighborhood with a sidewalk running adjacent to it. It was originally an overgrown weed patch with riprap, or rock rubble used to slow erosion, that was scattered throughout the base. So our end goal was to create a scenic walkway with a bridge that stemmed from the sidewalk and toured pedestrians through a native bioswale. In essence, it would serve as a beautiful and educational entrance to the community, giving folks walking by a taste of Winterset's values, a contrast to many neighborhoods that usually cycle through various annual plants at their front entrances.
For guidance, we contracted with a local native plant expert to design the swale and install the plant plugs, as well as handle the initial maintenance. Once the overall plan was agreed on, irrigation was installed, and work began in September of 2018. Though we contracted with an installer, we approached this project in a all hands on deck fashion, utilizing equipment and resources from our home building division, like skid steers and loaders, to shape the land and to create a retaining wall around the mouth of the culvert, and to eventually build a limestone pathway and bridge over the swale. Our Winterset community manager, Mr. Chuck Wainscott, Hunter, his wife Jenny, and I all pitched in on the actual planting and earthwork as well, to better understand the process as an excuse, better understand the process and as an excuse to get out of the office. And as I mentioned, the company we hired was in charge of the majority of the plant installation, as well as a couple of years of maintenance. In these pictures, you can see things are really starting to take shape with the landscape, and you can visualize the scope of the swale just by seeing where the coconut jute mat is laid out along the swale. Installing these plugs took days and was a tedious process, but the contracted crew did an excellent job installing the plugs, and we supplemented with help where we could. And here's a photo of Hunter assisting with the plant plugs, and it looks like he's giving himself future lower back problems.
I would advise against planting that way because my back is still sore.
Really from the first day we started, we did our best to document all aspects of the project, from taking plenty of pictures to creating Excel spreadsheets that outline plant types that were used in the initial design and related information such as the plant color, the average heights, and the blooming months. We wanted to ensure we had some color in the landscape year round and that all plants were placed correctly according to their use, all of which were aspects we were advised to consider by the installer. Here is an example of a spreadsheet I created based on the initial design. We've used this spreadsheet since for guidance on other landscapes that we've created in the neighborhood. And it was recommended that we use a liquid tea application, which is essentially a concentrated liquid fertilizer, as well as organic compost to plant into. And we initially had 1,706 plugs and 28 shrubs and trees planted. And I say initially because not long after the planting was completed, we encountered our first major setback on this project when we received one of the heaviest rains of the season, quite literally a gully washer. About half of the planted plugs had been washed out, and the coconut jute mat and organic materials all washed away. And as hard as this was for us to bear, we were quick in formulating a solution. And that solution was our idea of building additional rock check dams throughout the swale to slow the velocity of water. We replaced the jute mat and replanted the majority of those lost plugs. The lesson we learned here was to have a solid understanding of the potential velocity of the water when planting a swale like this. So in high flow areas, it'd be important to have an abundance of mechanisms to slow the flow of water, be it through check dams, riprap, or waterfalls, depending on the site conditions. But despite our best efforts to keep the bottom of the swale intact, time really had a way of changing our plans. Additional rains led us to realize that we were fighting an uphill battle, and retaining those plugs in the middle of the swale really no longer seemed like a viable option without an extended drought, or at least lighter rainfalls, mainly due to the velocity of the water. It was a rainy season that time when we were planting. And our second major dilemma with this project was our perceived maintenance, something that we now know is quite common, especially with newbies like us and planting areas like this. The stormwater flowing through this area brings with it tons of weed seeds, so the maintenance was near impossible to keep up with, which really made it even more difficult for the general public to differentiate between natives and weeds when they were walking by. So it is constant weed growth all around the pathways and all along the edges of the swale. It didn't help that this area is actually located downhill from 50 plus acres of raw land. And I've concluded that this particular maintenance issue was really due to the setting of the area itself, and really taught us how to better evaluate future locations for similar types of landscapes. And though we had a maintenance contract in place, Hunter and I spent a lot of days, like we said, pulling weeds, and acquired the help of Winterset Community Manager Chuck Wainscott and his interns at the time. And we knew it would just really take time for the natives to establish themselves and to get to the point where weed pulling was minimal. So that kept us working hard. And these are a couple photos I took actually just a few days ago, which marks, I believe, about 4 years after the project was started. We're happy with this final result, though over time we were forced to shorten the swale and to reduce the overall maintenance. So you can see from the first picture, the dense vegetation terminates after the bridge and converts to grassland. The weed pulling is still periodically required around the pathways, and you can see from the picture there are some weeds that could stand to be pulled, but it's gotten to a much more manageable point, and we're very happy with how this turned out, especially it being our first project, and have received numerous compliments from residents in the neighborhood. And our next native plant installation took the form of a gorgeous butterfly garden that we started in mid-2019. And at that time, Winterset had 2 existing butterfly gardens between the 6 neighborhoods. So we saw creation of a third one as a perfect opportunity for more experimentation. And this is roughly a 2,800 square foot plot of land that fortunately did not sit at the bottom of a 50 plus acres. And this garden was originally designed by the same expert that designed our bioswale, but we decided to take a more in-house approach and alter the design ourselves and install the plugs as well. Reason being because we were really after the education, if you couldn't tell. And the triangular plot of land was nestled between 2 recently completed homes, as you can see there on the left. And we knew how we wanted the main path to meander through the garden. So we started there, and we started shaping up that pathway and installed neighborhood mailboxes, and then the little water feature. And I utilized a drone to capture the overhead shot that you see there on the left. And I transferred this image to an artwork app that I have on an iPad and began playing with designs based on the initial design that was provided to us and with what little knowledge I had from our bioswale experience. The image on the right was the finalized design that we started the plant. And we rationalized that we didn't need to irrigate this area. Instead, we would hand water when we needed it, if we hit a dry spell, or just didn't have good luck with the rain. And that really worked out for us well, because this was a lot smaller area than the bioswale was. And we did have 2 water spigots installed and kept a hose handy. So that definitely helped things along. This image was taken shortly after we installed the brick walkway and additional shrubs. We worked with our community manager. He's a genius, does anything and everything landscaping, and he helped us to install that small little water feature that's centered in the park. And this shot was taken after we had spread a layer of organic soil over the surface and had mulch installed. This was taken shortly after we installed all the plugs, which was a combined effort between Hunter and myself. And this is what it looks like today. We've been very happy with the result of this butterfly garden. We routinely see families walking along the path, and it attracts plenty of pollinators, and weeds are no more of an issue than they would have been if we had planted, say, a traditional landscape.
After completion of the butterfly garden, we selected various pockets and sections of trail around the neighborhood and installed small native landscapes. We surrounded them with edge rock and kept with the same procedures, using organic compost and mulch. This is an example of one we planted with some rose verbena. It's provided good ground cover and has an attractive bright color when it blooms and is spread like wildfire, though we have success keeping it contained within the landscape bed due to that bordering that we used. In a slightly less sophisticated manner, we purchased a recommended blend of Missouri wildflower seed and hydro-seeded a half-acre portion of open pasture to see if this process was a practical approach. We were happy to see after a couple seasons that some of the seed was flourishing, and it provided some beautiful color and plenty of pollinators.
And I was happy to see one of our Winterset residents actually emailed me this photo, which I just thought was gorgeous and had to share with you guys. And he had taken this on his morning walk, and it was appreciative of the color that it added to that pasture there. And our goal is to not only impose these eco-friendly practices just because we know it's the right thing to do, but also to inform our residents about why it matters. Planting native can be considered a relatively new concept, so some may initially equate the landscapes with a weedy appearance. So while most residents were positive about the implementation of our natives, there's also some understandable hesitation. So it was important for us to manage this expectation as best we could. So to assist with that, we've promoted our process and reasoning at annual neighborhood meetings. We've also created educational signage for our native landscapes like the one that you see here. That's placed right beside our bioswale. And on the right is one of our past meeting agendas that includes our speaking points on invasives and natives.
Another educational tactic we use is an informative guide on the back of our trail maps. This shows common wildlife, trees, native plants, as well as invasives that can be found in our over 100-acre woods. This helps folks visualize and better understand the value that our neighborhoods provide, and it can open their eyes as to just how invasive some of these problem plants can be. We worked with Deep Roots in the Missouri Conservation Department, who assisted us with the photos and printing of our walking trail map and identifying local flora and fauna in our community.
And some of our residents are actually one step ahead of us. These are several shots from a home in Winterset Valley in which the homeowner incorporated natives extensively throughout their landscaping. As you can see, it's a unique and eye-catching front lawn.
One of my earliest memories of our Winterset neighborhoods consisted of my father and I walking the then undeveloped woods and my holding the measuring rod while my dad took elevation measurements with a theodolite. It was 93, and we were mapping where a section of the future 10 plus miles of walking trails would go. I was only 8 years old, and I remember the forest was a lot easier to traverse, in large parts because the dreaded honeysuckle bushes had not yet established themselves in our woods. For those of you who don't know, bush honeysuckle is a large shrub with red berries originally from Asia that were introduced to the States for landscaping and wildlife cover, but have since become one of the most aggressive exotic plants that have escaped and naturalized in urban areas. They leaf out early, and they keep their leaves longer than other plants. They shade out native wildflowers and young native trees on the forest floor, and they compete with the native plants for pollinators. Their berries are carbohydrate rich and lack the high fat content required for the long flights of migrating birds. And if that isn't enough, they grow so fast that they quickly encroach on wooded nature trails, making one wish they had brought a machete along for their afternoon hikes.
A bush honeysuckle has been just really a constant battle for us. While one of our preferred methods is of controlling this is an annual controlled burn, we are located within city limits and are limited in our abilities to conduct a prescribed burn. So we've therefore conducted a survey of where the issue is really most severe and have worked to cut back and selectively apply herbicide to those areas. These are pictures of the same spot before and after the removal of some of the honeysuckle. And the Missouri Conservation Department has given Winterset Community Association a $10,000 grant to attack the issue, and Forest Relief, which is an organization out of St. Louis, has provided us 160 various Missouri native shrubs to infill behind that removal effort. So we also utilize volunteers from the neighborhood to assist with those ongoing efforts.
It's a slow process and one we're still refining, but it's been successful in nearby areas. I've had the pleasure of volunteering with Bridging the Gap's KC Wildlands program manager, Linda Learbaum, at Swope Park, and seen the dramatic advances they've made in opening up their understory, and have learned the importance of having a long-term management plan from talking with Johnson County Parks and Rec field biologist Matt Garrett, who's been removing honeysuckle for 15 years, drastically diminishing its presence in places like Shawnee Mission Park and Ernie Miller Park. So we know it can be done.
Now, while bush honeysuckle is our main invasive issue, it's definitely not our only one. Callery pear tree is often referred to as the specific cultivar. Bradford pears are a common sight in both Midwest wildlands and neighborhoods. They were introduced from Asia with good intentions, but although Callery pear cultivars were bred to produce sterile fruit, the cross-pollination between different varieties has resulted in viable seeds that quickly grow into 40-foot tall deciduous trees that really outcompete the local natives. While we have removed them from our public areas, we also do our best to educate our homeowners on the issues that calorie pairs present through social media posts and newsletter updates, promoting events like Deep Roots Calorie Pair Buyback Program, through which homeowners are able to provide a picture of a calorie pair that they've cut down and will receive a native tree to replace it. Pretty cool program.
We learned about the importance of planting a variety of trees instead of a monoculture the hard way, I'm sorry to say, when we originally opted to plant ash trees as our main street tree from 1992 to about 2005. In 2005, one of our residents alerted us to the threat of the emerald ash borer and how quickly they can kill off the ash tree. This invasive beetle, originally from Asia, is first recognized in America outside of Detroit in about 2002, and we had been tracking its march west until by 2014 it had reached as far as Smithville Lake. By 2015 and 16, it was clearly evident in Kansas City, and in that time, the city removed 100% of their ash trees. We faced a dilemma in that the community association does not own the right-of-way between the curb and the front property line, as that space belongs to the homeowner. So any fix would have been a scissored approach unless the entire community was on board. After some collective head scratching on the board and some pragmatic management, we put a program together to attack it as a community association, ultimately spending 1/3 of what the cost would have been to remove the trees had it been left up to individual homeowners, and allowing us to make a collective buy for the appropriate replacement trees. Pictured as an inventory of trees stored within the parking lot of one of our neighborhood pools, ready for planting. Over the course of 5 or 6 years, we ended up removing all 1,386 ash trees and replaced them with 867 area-appropriate deciduous trees, including select varieties of maple, elm, linden, and oaks. As our Winterset developments reach maximum capacity, we have begun to transition to our next project a little north of us in the historic town of Liberty, Missouri. This will eventually be a 1,000-acre mixed-use master plan community immediately west of I-35 in Northwest Liberty. In planning for the development, Cutter and I, over the past couple of years, have had the pleasure of visiting a selection of communities across the country that has served as inspirational models for us. We'll give you some insight into some of the favorites, starting with one just outside of Chicago.
So one of the early communities we visited was the idyllic neighborhood of Prairie Crossing, one of the nation's first conservation developments, and this is located up in Grays Lake, Illinois. The development began in 1992 by George and Vicki Rainey, who began the Liberty Prairie Foundation that has helped protect and expand the 5,800-acre Liberty Prairie Reserve in which Prairie Crossing is located. In an effort to provide a national example of how to plant communities to enhance the environment and support a better way of life. It's a serene 677-acre development with only about 20% of its total acreage devoted to homes, built around a 22-acre lake and featuring an on-site farm. All the homes are of a traditional design and grouped somewhat closely together in order to have more open community space.
During our visit in May of 2021, we had the honor of meeting with George and Vicki Rainey, who shared the development's history with us and walked us through some of the environmental considerations they chose to make during its build-out. This includes reserving 100 acres for the Prairie Crossing Farm, a working organic farm protected by a conservation easement and now owned by the Liberty Prairie Foundation, which provides a source of healthy organic food for the neighborhood, as well as offering as a farm incubator and summer youth farming programs to help promote sustainable farming practices. It is here, nestled on the edge of the neighborhood, that the lead farmers Jeff and Jen Miller toured us through how they grow vegetables, fruits, herbs, and flowers using cover crops, intercropping, low tillage, and perennial planting strategies, providing thousands of pounds of organic produce each year to local markets and community food pantries. They also sell on site by operating a local CSA and a farm stand that operates on the honor system with a cash box or Venmo option. They promote community participation by including opportunities for children at the neighborhood charter school and Montessori to help with the daily farm work, and by offering farm and garden plots for homeowners to lease.
And following our farm tour and meeting with the Raineys, a gentleman by the name of Nathan Aberg, the director of the Liberty Prairie Foundation, took us on an informative bike ride through the community's 10-mile crushed limestone trail so that we could see how the neighborhood was designed to minimally impact the surrounding environment. Nathan pointed out how the neighborhood uses a water treatment train that channels rainwater and snow melt through open swales and wetlands into surrounding lakes, ponds, and streams. that opposed to our common gutter and storm drain system that we have. By consciously designing the way the water flows, including the redirection of roof downspouts to slightly depressed area between homes planted with rain garden species, the water that reaches the wetlands has already been cleansed by the time it flows into the central lake and nearby retention ponds. So this decreases the amount of stormwater runoff by almost 60% compared to your typical neighborhood. Due to the water's high quality, one of the ponds has actually recently become the first breeding refuge in Illinois for fish threatened with extinction through a pilot project with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources.
The water is also significantly cleaner because of the lack of pesticides and herbicides used in the community. Residents are encouraged to plant native when possible, and many residents integrate these native plant communities into their own landscaping to showcase their houses in formal groupings or planted as wild meadows, integrating seamlessly with the native landscape and adjoining prairie areas and contributing to the overall land ethic. Management of the prairie areas include periodic prescribed burns, which stimulate the growth of native vegetation, suppress non-native weeds, and require less fossil fuels than mowing. Burns on common areas are conducted by professional contractors and trained resident volunteers who serve on the neighborhood's environmental stewardship committee. But individual homeowners are permitted to conduct prescribed burns on their own property if they meet a number of criteria and follow a defined process laid out by the HOA, which also offers classes and social events based around the burn days.
And as our bike tour meandered through the neighborhood streets and passed open prairie and wetlands, Nathan pointed out how their environmental manager spearheaded the edible landscape concept to include street islands planted with edible trees and shrubs such as pawpaw, cherry trees, peaches, fruit, all different types of berries along the native boulder council rings, or along with what they call native boulder council rings that served as kind of gathering spots and resting spots. We biked past just a ton of homes utilizing rooftop solar panels, wind turbine used to help power the LEED certified community charter school that they had. We were informed that geothermal was used to help power both the charter school as well as the neighborhood event barn. And so partly due to this native ecosystem sensitivity, more than 180 different bird species had been spotted in the community compared to 15 species typically found on the conventionally farmed lands in the surrounding area. So residents we had talked to and had discussions with were delighted in sharing sightings of rare weasels, minks, egrets, and all sorts of wild animals, all thanks to the native habitat restoration efforts that enrich the lives of its human residents as well.
Another recent development we visited was Rain Dance in the town of Windsor, Colorado, about an hour north of Denver. At 1,500 acres, it's the largest master plan community in northern Colorado and one of the newest, having broken ground in about 2017. While offering popular amenities like an extensive neighborhood water park and connecting golf course, the developers of Rain Dance have at the same time tried to preserve the land's agricultural history by incorporating apple, pear, cherry, and plum orchards, rows of sweet corn on their community farm space, and setting aside land for their sunflower field. Similarly to Prairie Crossing, Rain Dance's 15-mile recreational trail system connects to a larger trail system outside of the neighborhood, which allows for longer bike rides and walks and access to the neighboring communities.
And because it's only just a few years old, the on-site demonstration farm had not progressed past its initial pumpkin patch and sweet corn rows, but plans include educational gardens that would allow for everything from gardening classes to outdoor kitchen areas for culinary classes and farm-to-table type dinners. When we visited, we were able to witness homeowners fishing in their stocked lake and picking their own pears and apples, and the fact that there was a park within 1/3 of a mile from every doorstep allowed homeowners to easily get outside and connect with nature and one another.
Here, for example, you can see the apple orchard Rain Dance installed, one of the apple orchards, with their main entrance bridge and sales center in the distance. This was one of the various pocket parks planted with fruit trees for the community to share. And here's a picture of that same orchard as it looked when we visited, taken out of the window of our car because I'm such a professional photographer. And on this slide, you may be able to make out a pocket park with green space and more fruit trees if you squint really hard there, just above the early stages of the neighborhood corn maze that they were installing. They were good to beautify future development lands by installing this sunflower field as well, which we were informed was popular with both photographers and Instagrammers. Following that visit, on our way home, we also visited a small custom home community called Fox Hill in Franktown, Colorado, 45 minutes south of Denver. Fox Hill bills itself as an eco-friendly community offering acreage home sites anchored by a professionally managed sustainable farm that offers a CSA tours and classes. Their resident farmer, Anthony Zamora, runs their greenhouse, orchard, and hops trellis, which has been providing hops for a local brewery to make up a community brew label. But unfortunately for us, no beer was on hand that day. They also support a berry picking patch for children, free-range chickens for eggs, and a small apiary for local honey. Anthony was especially proud of how his greenhouse aquaponics system utilized on-site tilapia tanks to fertilize his vegetables, while also allowing for fresh tilapia to be offered as a CSA option.
So homes here start in the $1 million range. So while it was a unique product, we were also impressed with their ecological considerations. Ms. Paige McLaughlin, their lead broker, explained to us that they have extensive design guidelines. For instance, they impose max fescue allowance on each one of their lots that they sell. Paige pointed out a few yards that we're currently installing their landscaping, and we're utilizing coconut jute mats that we're protecting recently dispersed native seed mixes underneath, which is a pretty cool concept. And when it comes to trees and shrubs, they also have requirements that stipulate the use of deer and drought resistant varieties to cut down on the total overall use of irrigation and plant loss. Like Prairie Crossing, Fox Hill also supports the use of rooftop solar and the option to add geothermal heating and cooling systems in their homes.
This you see here was the on-site greenhouse that was utilized mainly for leafy greens and seed starting, and housed the aquaponic tilapia tanks. You might just be able to make out one of the fish saying hi through the window there. I had the pleasure for my birthday last year of taking a trip with my wife Jenny down to Georgia to see friends, and we were able to spend a weekend exploring what will be the last master plan community that we'll compare in this presentation. In the rolling Chattahoochee Hills, I love saying that, a half-hour drive southwest of Atlanta lies the 1,200-acre community of Serenbe, founded by Steve Nygren in 2004. It is an idyllic mixed-use development that currently includes roughly 200 homes, commercial and art space, a rustic inn, 3 restaurants, and a 25-acre organic farm. Once completed, it's projected to house 1,600 residential units of varying types. Part of what makes it so unique is that it was designed in the style of Old English hamlets, clustering development within areas defined by the natural landscape with commercial space in the center of each village and residential units fanning outwards. Homes are situated close together in a new urbanism style, with wooded nature paths connecting each hamlet. This layout allows for 20% more dwelling units than would have occurred with traditional development, while saving the majority of the land for agriculture and preservation.
When Hunter returned from his trip and reported back on what he had learned, I was really impressed with the heavy focus on food in the community, because mainly I really like food. And Hunter said that almost 70% of the landscape incorporated into the community's path system consisted of edible species, including fig bushes, blueberry bushes, apple trees, and peach trees. The 25-acre organic farm grows more than 300 varieties of vegetables, fruit, herbs, and flowers, and many of which are actually used in Serenbe's on-site restaurants, as well as being sold through their neighborhood CSA at their farmers market that they had every week. And weekly farm tours actually offer opportunities to share with the public the many benefits of organic produce, pest and disease control, and the importance of composting. And they even have a neighborhood compost pickup along with their weekly trash and recycling. So I was very impressed to hear his report when he got back from that trip. I was jealous I couldn't go and see that myself.
It's a cool place, and to help promote the sense of community, each hamlet has designated signage promoting seasonal events happening throughout the neighborhood, as well as various features not commonly found in other developments like communal tree houses, forested playgrounds, pocket parks featuring in-ground trampolines, hula hoop share stations, public performance stages, public hammocks. Similar to Prairie Crossing, a small transfer fee on homes and open lot sales help fund neighborhood art and environmental initiatives. The streets are designed to follow the natural contours of the land, similar to what we've done in Winterset. This allows for a more natural feel to the development, as well as serving as a traffic slowing device that forces drivers to slowly take turns and not have straightaways to race down. Partly because of this, I counted more golf carts than cars while I was there and noticed that there was no shortage of electric charging stations. Uh, Similar to previous developments we've touched upon, Serenbe includes restrictions on lawns, a majority of which featured extensive xeriscaping, or landscaping that reduces or eliminates the need for irrigation. Stringent water conservation programs, including vegetated strips instead of concrete spillways, and sustainable LEED certified construction, help make it a holistic model for sustainable development. Tours are commonly offered to help educate the public, an informative approach exemplified in this picture of how they use the space between townhomes as an educational medicine garden.
And their medicine garden was home to over 50 different types of medicinal plants, with a meandering sidewalk and informative signage to serve as educational tool for visitors. And all these features help to create a unique sense of place and really set these developments apart from the rest, in our opinion. And for the final portion of the presentation, we're going to give you an exclusive look at our project called Montage. This is 11 years in the making, and this project actually finally just became public just a couple weeks ago. So we're very excited to be discussing this. The concept actually began in 2013 when our father partnered with a gentleman by the name of Tom Hart, and then formed Gale Hart Communities. Tom is an established commercial and residential developer out of Denver and brings a national perspective, having developed in Colorado and California, including, some of you may know, the trend-setting 5,000-acre Stapleton community located in Denver, which has now since been rebranded as Central Park. And Montage will be located off Highway I-35 in Liberty. Will total 1,055 acres when it is fully constructed.
As you can see here, Montage will be a platform for all housing types, ranging from starter homes to 1.5-acre estate lots and everything in between. It'll also include roughly 2.2 million square feet of commercial space and flex tech office space. Total build-out time is difficult to project, but at a minimum, we're looking at 10 to 15 years, and we're excited to announce that initial groundbreaking could occur in early 2023, meaning the first move-ins would occur in the summer of 2024.
Montage will be led by our guiding principles to serve as a guide for future community decisions. And we believe it's really important to share this vision in order to build community engagement and to give residents really an understanding of our motivations. Our principles cover a wide range of philosophies, but one I'd like to point out in particular is our emphasis on the value of environmental enrichment through intentional landscape designs and open green spaces. This will be reflected in our design guidelines, which will include native planting standards as well.
Once completed, there will be over 170 acres of green space and over 7 miles of walking trails with native pocket parks spread throughout. This will include a 1.5-mile walking and running trail with a flyover I-35 connecting the current Rush Creek Trail system to our sports park. Montage will provide the final link to loop the area's regional trail network.
Now, a development of this size really provides a platform for quite a lot of unique opportunities. There will be extensive site experiences, including native butterfly and zen gardens, fishing lakes, and a demonstration farm, which we're calling The Grove. And The Grove will be a working 8-acre demonstration and learning farm, and it will include an orchard and vineyard, with special emphasis on child, teen, and family experiences regarding the principles of good land stewardship.
We've recently applied for a federal grant through the Mid-America Regional Council to install Missouri native vegetation along 2.2 miles on the west side of I-35, totaling 22 acres. Adjacent to this corridor would be extensive walking and biking trails. The addition of native forbs and grasses would add to the 6-state I-35 Monarch Highway initiative by supporting various pollinator species, conserve air and water quality, and provide a green welcome mat to the city of Liberty.
And that concludes our presentation on a developer's take on eco-conscious neighborhoods. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. It's been our pleasure to provide this presentation, and hopefully you were able to take something away from it. And if not, feel free to comment or stick around for the questions and tell us what we've been doing wrong or what we can be doing better. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cutter and Hunter. Thank you both. That was very, very informative. Got some great things going on, and a lot of other developments that you highlighted there. Question: I was wondering if homeowners or home buyers were seeking you out or other developments such as this due to their kind of eco mindset.
We have in the home building industry seen an uptick in this kind of outdoor centric neighborhood construct where, especially in the past couple of years with stay-at-home restrictions, people are just wanting to be outside that much more. And so a lot of the example neighborhoods we pointed out today were based around the concept of what is being termed as agrihoods, which are neighborhoods based around a farm concept where once golf course communities were very popular, agrihoods recently have kind of been on the rise, in part due to just that increased demand and people wanting to connect with nature and connect with other people in service of nature.
That's awesome. Early on, you were talking about different, enforcing heat pumps in the household, and obviously you didn't plant any calorie pairs to begin with, but are there any restrictions placed on homeowners once they bought the place, or even they've sold it to a second person, on whether they could plant invasive trees or not?
And that's an excellent question. Currently, the only the rule that we enforce within Winterset is our street tree program. However, kind of the landscaping approval process, how that works is I am the quote ARC that will approve their landscape design prior to it being installed on new homes. So if I see the bush honeysuckle or anything else that would be a problem, I have the ability to kind of chop it off there and not allow that to be installed. So that's kind of been our way to manage that and make sure that nobody's planting anything that they shouldn't be. But there is no written rule in our design guidelines about bush honeysuckle or other invasives. So that's going to be something that we'll be implementing on the Liberty development project.
That's great. One other question, this might be our last one. What are some financial barriers that might arise for communities interested in doing something of this scale in places they could look to funding? I think this is in terms of converting an existing development into more eco-friendly practices.
Well, there's always a long list of financial barriers with any type of project. But we've got a good set of investors relative to our Liberty project. And as well, we mentioned we're applying for various grants to receive funds for these types of projects that really benefit the entire municipality itself. So I want to make sure I'm answering the question clearly enough, but that there's places to be looking for funding. It's really kind of understanding the resources that we've used in the past, Missouri Department of Conservation. There's all sorts of outlets that we have in our repertoire that have, if we are trying to receive funding for a certain thing, we know who we can go to ask and where we can find a source. So it's been a bit of a juggle on some of our projects, but everybody has agreed with our philosophy, and it's not hard getting various folks on board to achieve the kind of goals that we're looking at.
Sorry, It's muted. Question from Chris, not me, Chris Cardwell. On the map of the Liberty development, did the blue areas along the highway indicate Mark Mid-America Regional Council funded corridor planting?
Let's see, the blue areas. I do not believe we had that area for our Monarch flyover indicated on that plan, but that will be along the west side of I-35, pretty much running the full extent of that project. So Chris has an excellent point. It probably would have made sense if we could highlight that portion a little bit more clearly to show you really what that area entails, because it is a good amount of acreage and it will be a great setting that people will see driving into Liberty and anybody just coming in to Kansas City through I-35.
Very good. We are bumping up against your office hours, so we'll take my other questions and encourage anybody else if they have continued conversation that they want to have with Hunter and Cutter, they can do so in their office hours, which is starting here in just a couple minutes.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Again.
Yeah, thank you all.